Good morning, sports card fans, and welcome back to Hobby Hotline on For Collectors. My name is Dan. I'm going to be your host this week, and I am joined by two esteemed colleagues. Good morning, Victor. How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on today. Good morning to the chat, and let's do it.
And, of course, Rich. Uncle Rich Klein, how are you, sir?
I am fine. Our central air conditioning unit or something within it decided not to work last night, so that was a first world problem. Thankfully, it's not summer yet here in Texas, so it wasn't too bad, and we're not going to be too hot for a while. So until it gets fixed, at least I can get through. But the hobby is hotter than our house.
Facts.
I was going to say, you're down in Texas. This could be a really serious problem. That's okay. So we have some topics to cover today, and some stuff we can do a little improv also. But I guess the topics, I was thinking that since Victor and I were both attendees of Strongsville, and there have definitely not been enough Strongsville videos on YouTube. I can say that.
No, there's nothing about Strongsville. Nobody posted anything. It was the most under the radar show I've ever seen in my life.
and I also had a topic about vintage card prices going right up, and how that affects us, and it affects the chat, because the chat, we get a lot of vintage people here For Collectors and Hobby Hotline. So we can talk a little bit about that. Also wanted to talk about what else do we have? eBay. eBay canceling cancellations, I think, is kind of important, and the ramifications of that. And then Uncle Rich, you had another topic that I think we
we have a couple topics. One thing that opened this week, and it opened to prices beyond anybody's expectations or control, was the return of Topps Chrome football. And if you think vintage card prices are going up, look at the prices of unopened Topps Chrome football 2025. As an example, one of my friends, I was handing out flyers for my small show that I do at Memorial Day weekend. And I have a couple friends who are nice enough to let me hand out flyers. And one of my friends says, opening day, he was selling packs, not jumbo packs, regular old packs of Topps Chrome football at $190 a pack.
Wow.
And he sold some, which to me was
a jumbo pack, right, Rich?
It was just like, what planet am I on?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to spend $190 for a pack, I might as well buy a pack from the 60s. If I can find one at that price.
Yeah, well, you can find the 70s then. The other thing we were going to cover, if we get to it, I'm a lawyer, so I like law stuff, is a gentleman he's from Arizona, but he sued in California. He sued Collectors Universe under the antitrust statutes, and that is an issue to discuss. I'm not sure how much of an effect it's going to have on the hobby, but I think it's interesting. But before we begin and get into the weeds a little bit, let me say hello to members of the chat. Good morning, Stu, Sir, Scott, YouTube Sports Card Hall of Famer and a regular contributor here. Thank you, sir. Wait, I thought that was Yank Me Card Steve. Okay, Confluence Sports Card. That is Ruben. Mad City Brew. Good morning, sir. Peter B is here, as is Philly Joe. Dave Peacemaker Cards, another one of our friends from Strongsville, as was, of course, the great Mookie Chilson, who I hope to see tomorrow at the Garfield show. We've got Foul Ball is here. Good morning, sir. That is Frank Guastella. Hope I got that right, sir. Abe in Vegas is here. Laura is here, as is Baseball Card Curmudgeon, who was up late with me in the Carlos stream, hanging out. And yes, the busiest man on YouTube. So I was on with Carlos for 4 hours last night. I'm hosting Hobby Hotline. And tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, I am on Bowman 53's channel for the first time in a couple of years. Alex invited me back on, unbelievably. All right. D, I don't know. Hello, person whose name is too long for me.
Let's just call him Dean.
Mike J. Hawker. Mike, I put this up on IG today. Thank you, sir. I purchased this from Mike at Strongsville at a prearranged 1949 Leaf rookie card of Ted Kluszewski. Just wonderful card. The great Bob Boozle is here. Phil Necro fan. Billy, how are you, sir? And the great Poodle Lev is here. Let's see. Hi, Pop Professor. Brian, how are you? I watched your video in your car. Mike Canadian Cards, who is also at Strongsville, and one of the people hanging out with us at many of the events. And, of course, the great Mike Ham is here this morning. Mike, I hope you're feeling better. He wasn't feeling so great last night. But Victor, Strongsville,
Yes, sir.
I watched your video. Couple of things. Do not ever go to Ramada's ever again.
Correct.
And apparently Bonefish was a good place, and it was right next to my hotel, and I never went. So
Wow.
But more seriously, sir, I think you had a good time, and I'm glad to hear. And what are your thoughts about Strongsville? I think you're going to be going back next year, which is great news.
I did. It was my first Strongsville show. Ironically, such a popular show that's been going on for so many years. And I'm only a 5-hour drive away, and I finally got to one. But just to show the power of marketing here, I mean, what drew me to Strongsville was the marketing that YouTubers are doing. A lot of us in the community constantly talking about Strongsville, and I'm like, well, let me check it out, and I'm glad I did. My wife and I, we were been really busy with a lot of different things, and we haven't done anything for quite some time. And it was like, let's just get away for the weekend. And took my wife to the first card show she's ever been to. And she absolutely had a blast with me at the show. And overall, my big takeaways is, number one is I don't think if we keep marketing this the way we are, and we keep in the YouTube space, we're going to make this like a destination show where we meet. I really, they're going to outgrow that building pretty quick. And I believe I heard Mike Moynihan mention this in one of his videos, but I absolutely agreed, because I was having the exact same thoughts halfway through the show on a Saturday. I'm like, this is the first time they're putting on this combo show. And I'm like, they're going to outgrow this building like within the next year or two. So that was a big takeaway. Also, really, I don't think I've ever seen that much raw vintage in one show, at least not at a regional show. There was a lot of vintage, a lot of raw vintage. And you typically see vintage like at the National, but it's like most of it is graded and high-end grades. But here we had stuff at every price range, and a lot of raw stuff. If you're wanting to put, I was kind of motivated now to put together the 1970s set, because that was the year I was born. And I used to have the set. Yeah,
I have a lot of them.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I want to put this set together now that I found Strongsville, And so, yeah.
Interesting comment, because I completed 2 sets at Strongsville, and because of the number of raw cards, and I knew which dealers to go to, and I knew them all personally, so it was a good scenario. And so obviously everybody was busy, so it wasn't like they were hanging out with me and chatting. But I was able to complete 2 sets. And Uncle Rich, you just did a podcast with Dr. Jim about set completion. And I can tell you right now, we're out there. We're still around, and it was tough to get to some of these tables. Like J.D. Heckerthorn had set out a huge platform so that people could pull up chairs one by one, and you had to wait for the chair. It was like you couldn't just sit down and go. You had to wait for the chair till somebody was done. So I think in your podcast, you talked about this, and the question is, are set builders still around? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, and one of the things in the podcast, they are still around. It's just that when Dr. Jim and I started, he started obviously before I did, but when we both started, almost everybody, even the dealers at the shows, were collectors. And because we had less sets, we all completed our sets.
Yes.
The difference is we're still a little bit older than a lot of collectors coming in nowadays. I mean, Victor is a young pup. He's only 55. He's a young one, and you're young too. But not a lot of younger collectors are going to enjoy the chase of getting all the 69 commons in a set or a 7, any of these sets.
Sir, there are no commons. There's no such thing as a
card.
common. This is a common card, right? Right? Common card, Andy Messersmith, 1969 common
Number
card.
296, if I remember, somewhere around there, if I remember correctly.
That is 296. You, sir, are an encyclopedia. But here's my point. Andy
I wrote enough
Messersmith is not a
almanacs.
common player.
I kind of, muscle memory on that, but that's a different
He's
subject.
He's the first free agent in the history of baseball.
Nice.
Everything that Curt Flood did to get the contract to be changed, they then went to court. They went to not to court. They went to an arbitrator, and they got free agency. And Andy Messersmith was the person. And that's not a common card. You call it a common, and it's priced like a common. But this is a very uncommon player.
It's the toughest series. It's a good card. I mean, it's an it actually truly is in baseball history an undervalued card because it's not even that easy. It's easy, but not super easy. Cool. I'm with you, but there's not going to be a lot of video of Andy Messersmith. Even 20 years from now, you'll have to be somebody like I am in Sabre to really dig into who is Andy Messersmith. People won't remember, and that's.
Well, I'm going to do a video on him. That's why this card is on my desk.
It's sad, but that's part of what it is.
So this comment is interesting, and we're getting off topic a little bit, and I want to get back to Victor, what you talked about because it was a comment from David Chase about the size of the show. David Chase is another person who was at this show. This is a good comment from Kuderlev. Set collecting is much tougher because dealers don't bring inventory of commons, and this is true, but you have to know which dealers to go to. And I was fortunate because I've been to Strongsville now 3 times in a row, and I knew these particular dealers would, in fact, have the inventory, and that's how I was able to complete the sets. And I should mention Billy, a Phil Necro fan, did complete the 64 set, and he commented on that. And he and I were going from the show to the room to figure out which ones we still needed, back into the show, get some cards. It was fun. It was like back and forth, and it was fun to hang out with him. But most dealers only bring showcase items of the GOATs, and I think that's correct. And to a certain extent, that is an issue that we have to deal with. But Victor, you had mentioned
to be fair, as a person who has set up at a lot of shows, your ROI, your return on investment for the table space you're paying, is not always going to be, it's a lot easier if you have showcases to sell 1 or 2 expensive cards than it is a whole bulk of common cards. When you have a reputation for selling cards, like Uncle Dick DeCourcy, who's retiring, I think, finally for the 2nd time, at the National, when he'd have these setups, and in the Philly, when he had the setups back in the day at Willow Grove and all these places, when you have a reputation for bringing commons, you can bring a lot more commons than somebody just coming in new too. You have to build up that reputation for having commons.
So Victor, this is a good comment. Strongsville went from an ice rink to a school gym, which is true. And it was only in the ice rink for 2 years before it outgrew it. If attendance keeps increasing, we'll be at the local mall in no time. I think that's a joke, but the reality is, what your point is that they're already busting at the seams.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking was, this is a combined card show. The best way to do this would probably be to do Strongsville Vintage on one day, because you got a whole nother part of the gym, and Greenie's show on another day where he could take over. So I think that the issue of them outgrowing the location might be just to make it Strongsville only. Thoughts, Victor?
Yeah, that's a possibility. That's definitely going to thin out the crowd or better manage the crowd. I've never seen a show do that. I don't know how good of an idea that would be, but yeah, they definitely need to rethink their location. I don't know what's out there, but if they were to go into a bigger location and partner with 4 collectors and double down on the marketing and that sort of thing, I think I think we can pack out the next location as well.
We have a promoter here in Texas. This weekend, he's doing a show in Fort Worth that actually is both sports cards and TCG, because it's a big room. It's 400 tables, maybe even 500 tables. The other shows he does is in a slightly smaller location. It's for me, it's an easy straight drive basically down one street. So I love going to that show. And what he does is the even months, February, April, etc., are sports card shows. January, March, May, etc., are TCG shows. So you could, instead of one day and the other day, because he tried that originally with Saturday being sports cards, then Sunday being TCG, he realized for his audience it was better to split the shows into sports. And then, obviously there'll be some TCG. There are a few TCG people there, that have that as part of their side gig, and TCG. And I think there's probably one or two sports cards that drift into the TCG world. And I think that's a better way of doing it. Instead of one day and the other day, the Strongsville show went for several days. What was it, 2 or 3 days?
It was three parts. Part of Friday,
Friday afternoon,
Saturday,
Saturday, Sunday. Okay, so it's a 3-day show. So
yeah.
I would do one show, one big show vintage, one big show modern.
Yeah.
You can kind of intersperse it. And what I mean by that is, back in the 90s, there were vintage shows. And the rule for the vintage shows were really simple. You really weren't supposed to bring in anything modern, but your show, if you had showcases, you couldn't have modern cards in the showcase. The only cards you could have in your showcase were vintage cards.
Well, the Strongsville show has those kinds of restrictions, although you can't. I mean, you can have some. You could have some. It's not like entirely, but you were supposed to have a certain amount of vintage, and this is good news. Orlando will be attending Strongsville every year.
I think a bad take that I might have, and maybe the chat can chime in, those who were there.
Yep.
But in my opinion, I didn't see the TCG tables as busy as the sports card tables. And I don't know, does that area have a market for filling up a TCG show? I don't even think there was that many TCG dealers there as opposed to sports card dealers.
Well,
I don't think that's a bad take.
To be honest, once your show has a reputation as a vintage show, the TCG people, that's not a TCG show. Bo, I saw Bo's comment, and for him, it works well. He doesn't have, 300 tables. He has, if I remember, 175 tables at the Madison Card Show. And I think he does something very similar when he uses, I'll call it the arena or the bigger location he uses, where he splits the sports card part and the TCG part, if I remember his podcast correctly on that. Everybody does it differently. But Strongsville has such a reputation. I was at Strongsville in 1992. It was a vintage show in 1992. 2026, it's still a vintage show.
Yeah, It's been going on since 1979. And I've been going on for longer than that. But so Orlando's point here is that there were vintage dealers on the modern side, and some of them were because they were late getting in. Some of it was just there wasn't enough room for it. So if you really took all the vintage guys, it's more than half of the gym. That being said, I don't know how you do it unless you do 2 different shows, but I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but we'll see. I mean, these guys have the Expo guys, Steve Menzie and Mikey Singer, who, major shout out to them for organizing this and having it come out like as well as it did. They're guys with ideas, and they're ideas guys who have made it a really successful up in Canada, and they've made it successful at Strongsville. So I feel like they'll figure it out.
And then we'll figure it out. I'm with you. And they'll figure it out, whether it's the Bo Spencer Thompson way of doing one day, or splitting the room up, or just doing 2 separate shows like Dan here does at the MTX shows here in the DFW area. So they'll figure out what they're most comfortable with.
Yeah.
Oh man, Mookie Chilson is a very funny person. I hope to see Mookie tomorrow at I think I already said this at Garfield. Rich, I'm going to Dallas today.
By the way, I love the Garfield card show. I went to that show so often back in the day. It's a wonderful show. Gary's a good friend of mine. I still know many of the vendors in that room. It's an inexpensive, fun show that he's raised a ton of money for the Boys and Girls Club that way. So I'm glad Gary keeps battling through his health issues.
That's tomorrow, but today I'm going to Dallas.
Okay.
Albeit it's in New Jersey, but I'm going to the Dallas card show.
Gotcha.
That's okay. We'd love to have you in Dallas. I could send you to this Fort Worth show. I think you'd enjoy it.
I'm sure I would, but I'm not. I'm making a joke about that. There's a Dallas show in New Jersey today.
Yes.
Yes.
When
you get the air, putting on
have you ever been to
that
location?
It's in New Jersey.
Have you ever? Yes. And one of the things, and that's correct, it's a Dallas card show in New Jersey. And one of the things is that Kyle Robertson and his team, and we've talked about this on Dr. Beckett's podcast. Excuse me. They have an arrangement with an autograph show. People have been autograph show promoters, but they weren't getting enough sports card people in. So they bring a lot of good autograph guests to the Dallas card show. In return, Kyle and his team bring a lot of sports card people, and they're a good sports card conduit to go to these people's shows in the Cincinnati area, in the Chicago area, and now the Dallas card show at Raritan Center.
So I'm going because I'm burned out on card shows since I just spent a week in Ohio, but I need content. So there you go.
I'm curious. Let me, when you post,
it's curiosity too. Yeah. It's curiosity, and who knows? I'm working a card show next weekend. I need a little bit of inventory, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, so next topic. People have mentioned this in the chat. It's. I don't think a topic we're going to spend that much time on, but it is something to discuss, and that's that this week a lawsuit came out, filed in, I think it was the Central District of California Federal Court. An individual who seeks to have his case classified as a class action is suing Collectors Universe for antitrust violations. The complaint is very thorough. The complaint is written by a law firm, a good law firm, and it's thorough because it goes over the different reasons why and the different things that have happened that make the allegation of an antitrust violation realistic, which is that a big conglomerate bought smaller grading companies and are now under one umbrella, and it creates what is called an illegal restraint of trade. You don't have to have a monopoly. It has to be an illegal restraint of trade, and that's the lawsuit. And I think that it was pled well. I have some issues legally with it that I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but I'm just wondering your thoughts on this, Victor. I know that I think you have talked about it, or possibly you'll talk about it in your weekly video tomorrow.
Yeah, I noticed that your head is chopped off again, like last night on Carlos' channel. Yeah, Dan, I was really wanting to hear your take on it most because, of course, your background. I don't have a lot of background, although lawsuits do interest me. This one in particular, there you go. This one, my only thought on it is I don't see it to have a lot of teeth. I'm just me speculating. However, when you start to add these accusations or actual lawsuits, when you start stacking these things up, and then you add the one from the one Congressman Pat Ryan already has their eye on them, right? And all these lawsuits and complaints start to compound. And eventually, I think the rubber band snaps. That's kind of my view on it at the moment.
I totally agree with you. But let's hear from Uncle Rich first.
Okay. Well, and I think Victor nailed it. You're a lawyer. I'm not. Even though I stayed at a Holiday Inn Holiday Inn Express last night. But Victor, I think, nailed it in terms of maybe not individually any of these work, but the grand totality of stuff going on in the hobby that's always been somewhat a little bit interesting may change. You know, you saw Paul Lesko and Whatnot's already made some changes based on the arbitration cases Lesko's law firm has posted about, and he's adding people, and someday hopefully he'll come on the channel again when that is closer to completion, and I'd love to hear his take on this as well. But when stuff starts happening, that's when maybe not one, it may be the 20th one down the line, but then the dam may break. And that's why I think Victor nailed it. This may not be the right case. There will be one that gets everything going. Look, Live Nation just got found guilty in court of some antitrust violation, and supposedly they're going to have to pay a lot of money. I haven't gone to a concert in so many years that it doesn't affect me, but the people who spent all that money on the tickets, they may very well get some money back, which is great for them. Right now, you know, there are pros and cons to have a very regulated market. We're in a very unregulated market, and there's a lot of cons to that, but there's also some pros to that, is that we can do what we want to some extent. Unfortunately, when you do what you want, sometimes you don't always do it perfectly.
Yeah. So I agree with Victor that the more this happens, the more eventually somebody will say something, and something will the dam will break, essentially. So what we have here, though, is we have a single individual who, if it is not classified as a class action, will probably fail because of something called standing. So pay attention to the word standing. That's all. I'm not going to get into it. It's a legal thing. I don't want to lecture people on the law. But the problem is, generally speaking, that he only has a small amount of damage, and he's asking for a very large reward and a very large set of things for the court to do. Break up the company just because you paid a little extra for some grading, which was probably wrong and gave you worse numbers than you would have gotten otherwise. That doesn't give you the right to break up the company. So that's kind of the problem here. But if you get a class action and you have 400 people saying this happened to us, that gives more power to the court to do the kind of remedies that person is seeking. But we'll see what happens. I think standing's going to be a problem. I did a little bit of background on it afterwards, but we'll see. I also would love to have Paul on here. Paul was on my channel a couple of years ago. Great knowledge of not only the law, but also great hobby knowledge. So really would be a terrific guest.
And
so
Paul is definitely a dedicated hobbyist. So yes, that's what makes him so. Just like you, Dan. That's that's why I'd love to hear the two of you chat again, because two lawyers who can explain things in layman terms is something we need in the hobby.
Well, we spent that time talking about cards. So
well, we must have had a downtime for suits in the hobby at that point.
Well, the concept was, we're going through the history. I'm the history guy. I'm also a card guy, and I'm also a lawyer. So it was perfect to have Paul on to talk about how different lawsuits had affected the hobby. So we went all the way back to like the double play in 1941. We talked about the Burke Ross thing. We talked about some of the issues between Fleer and Topps. And so, it was kind of like historical and legal and also cards. So I thought that was a fun show, but it was very early in the history of my channel. So not that many people.
If I remember, doesn't Paul collect items related to all those lawsuits?
Exactly. Yep. So we showed a lot of cards. So, speaking of legal stuff, eBay recently made a change, which I think is important. I don't know what the effect is going to be, but they eliminated, and it's not yet. I think it becomes effective like May 13th or something, and it's only as to auctions, and it's only in the United States, and it eliminates the ability of the buyer who wins the auction to cancel without permission of the seller. And I think that's important because it was something that was probably abused. Victor, thoughts on this?
sigh of relief. And the only thing that came to my mind when I read this headline was, it's about time. You're only a decade or two late, but I'll take it. Good move.
So what do you think the effect is going to be? I mean, what are they actually helping to take place for sellers who people say are not protected as much as they should be on eBay? What do you think this is going to do for sellers?
Well, I know Bo is in the chat and he's on eBay Live, and I'd love for him just to say how often has stuff been canceled on him after he has made his his sales, because those are technically auctions.
Right.
So I'd love to, he doesn't have to go through details. I'm just curious about how often that happens to him. And I think it's better because I think that's better because you don't. And there's always a legitimate, and in life, there's always a legitimate reason that sometimes does pop up. And I get that, but
and they still left that window open.
Most of the reasons are not legitimate that I've seen over the years, but there are legitimate reasons.
It's putting regulation on the speculators and the flippers who want to purchase something during the game because of certain players doing really good, and then the player fails to accomplish whatever, and then they cancel the bid. And there's a lot of that type of stuff going on.
Here's your example: Drake May before the Super Bowl. If you had bought a Drake May card on auction on Saturday, thinking he's going to have a great game on the Super Bowl on Sunday, and he played terrible, and he didn't play real well. I think he played terribly, but the Seahawks defense certainly had a lot to do with that. But he did not play well. And then on Monday, you get that note, I'm canceling for whatever reason. That's really what they're trying to prevent. Thank you, Bo, for answering the question.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering the question. And so he's getting about 1 to 2%, it looks like, cancellations.
Yeah.
And that's, 1 to 2% isn't bad. As he says, most of eBay Live is auto pay immediately.
Yeah.
But 1 to 2%, if it's higher than that, then this is a great rule. But if it's 1 to 2%, then it's just going to maybe make it 0.5%. And anything that cuts this down is great. And it'll prevent the Drake May things, or Bam on the Miami Heat who got tripped up and got hurt. If you were gambling that the Heat was going to go deeper in the playoffs, and after LaMelo Ball tripped him and he got hurt and all that.
Right.
All of us, and then you cancel it. Oh, well, I screwed up. Well, yeah, you screwed up because he got hurt. and that's really where I think a lot of the problem is.
I think he means the buyer doing something to the card and saying the card was damaged in the mailing process. Yeah, I mean, the problem for eBay is that you're never really going to eliminate scummy and scammy people from the
platform,
the commerce. So it's going to happen, and it's just a question of trying to do whatever they can do in their processes to eliminate a certain small percentage of it. And auto pay probably helps, or helped, or continues to help, certainly. And this is something that I think is going to help also. But guys are still going to do the thing. You can always still ask. Sellers are still going to get the "my son clicked this at 2 a.m. By mistake" thing, or there's always going to be somebody asking for it. But now it's not an automatic, and they can say no and send the card out. So it's something that at least adds more protection for sellers, which, as people have said in the chat, and I said earlier, sellers are not necessarily the high priority of eBay. eBay makes money, generally speaking, off of the buyers. So that's what they have competing interests, but ultimately, it's something I think that in the long run is probably good.
And
for a small
we had
percentage.
a legitimate case a couple months ago. Suze, works at CGC, a very well-known Derek Jeter collector. And she posted her son actually went through the process and bought a card on eBay. And she honored the purchase. It was like $5 or $10, so she honored the purchase. But she goes, it actually happened to me where my son actually bought a card, at the age of 5, and knew how to do it from watching how mommy did it. And so it does happen legitimately too.
Well, they say, Uncle Rich, we need new blood in the hobby. So even if
Boy,
they're 5
she's
years
doing
old,
a great job of that.
So, well, we raced through all the topics. There was one other thing we wanted to talk about, which was that was it Topps Chrome Football came out this week? And
boy, did it
the boxes
ever
were really
come out
cheap, and it was a great value, right? Am I wrong about that?
It let's just say it hit flaming and got hotter from there. As I said, I was handing out flyers at some of my friends' stores, and I had heard, from reading some of the stuff about what was going on. So the first store I went to on Thursday, walked in, the owner, the person who helps him opening the store wasn't there. So he was actually there. And we usually chat at the big shows, but he was actually there. So we were chatting, and I bought some cards from his $2 bin. The best card I bought. I'm not going to make any money on it, but the best card I bought, it was damaged on the back, but a 54 Johnson Braves Joe Adcock card. I was happy with that card than any of the other cards I'm going to make money on.
Good stuff.
That was good stuff. I was like, hey, this is cool. I don't care if I make any money on this card. I mean, I could see the back was obviously damaged, but it's like, I don't care. This is fine. This is a win. And he was telling me the packs, we discussed what the prices were doing. And he says he actually sold some packs at $190 a pack because people wanted to be involved in the opening day of Topps Chrome Football. Fanatics sent people countdown clocks for the release of Topps Chrome Football. They did a lot of stuff. They sent swag to a lot of their store owners. They did a really good job promoting it, but I don't think even they thought it would explode the way it did on the secondary market. And Neo did a great video explaining, I don't know who to, there's no blame. It's just, we have to accept this because everybody's doing what they have to do to get through. The store owners, if they sell it too cheaply, somebody's going to buy it out and flip it. So they can't sell it too cheaply. The customers have the right to say, I buy it or I don't buy it. Everybody's got the right to say yes or no. And I think that's one of the things in the business where everybody's got the right to say yes or no to anything. You bought you finished your 52 Bowman set, which is a great set, and your 72 Top set, which is another great set at Strongsville. And finishing those sets are great. But if somebody was charging $20 instead of $10 for a raw 72 high number, you have every right to say, that's double what it should be. I don't want it.
I did. I turned away from some people. I did. I went to other, I had choices. But that's the problem with this. And this is a good point. The breakers got the allocation. I mean, when Neo said that Burbank Cards in the first wave of allocation got 3 boxes, I mean, that's insane. This is the biggest and maybe the best card shop in the country. And they get such poor allocation first round. That to me, that's a problem.
And yes, and in fact, Rob even posted how one of his friends in the New England area got nothing. So, we definitely want to have the stores getting the product. Another store I went into on Friday, and there were some political reasons involved, nothing with him personally, just where the store is located and what's around him. He's working around the edges to get he worked around the edges to get Topps Chrome Football into the store to make $100 a box. Because he is not direct with Fanatics, but he knows his customers want things in. And as a matter of fact, he's doing something innovative to compete with the stores that get direct, is that even though he's making less, he's kind of reducing his profit even more. But if you open the box in the store and you pull something decent or something you want, he will send it to PSA for you.
So
and you don't, and you don't have to pay for it. He is sending it to PSA for you.
this comment is fantastic. Reasonably priced retail wax is what built the loyalty to and nostalgia for the hobby. And I agree with that. What experience is the hobby building now from the retail side if everybody is getting burned, if you're paying too much money and you're not getting any return? I mean, this is you could say, yeah, everybody has the choice to buy or not buy, but this is a problem. And I think that this is an excellent point.
And here's the thing. I'm going to say this. I think Fanatics knows that intuitively, but it's really hard when you're a business. If I watched a lot of the content that came out of the Topps Industry Conference, even though I like to say I don't watch much hobby stuff, that I actually paid a lot of attention to. And a lot of the material that came out of the Topps Hobby Conference was about the joy of collecting. And all people that that gave the speeches talked about buying the cards early 90s, mid 90s. Your barrier to entry in those days was a lot cheaper. If you joined the hobby in 1991, and we had 30,000 accounts at Beckett at the time, there was Top Stadium Club exploded, but for most of the products, you could spend $20 or $30 and get 540 cards. Chris Harris, I see, is in the chat. He's probably salivating. Oh, I'd love to go back and get those 540 cards.
But the problem is, you can say love of collecting all you want at this get together, and you could throw out all the corporate, happy speak you want. But the reality is, if your actions, defy what you're saying, this is a problem. If Fanatics thinks that they can they can walk in and say that we love collectors, but then screw collectors, that's a problem. On this.
Fanatics has been doing something for the stores that is, in my opinion, a very underrated part. They do understand that not everybody can afford even the $190 packs. And a lot of the material you see at the Walmarts, at the Targets, at the big box stores, you can now also pick up, if you're lucky enough to have a card store in the area and they have a direct account, you can get the retail type boxes at your local card store. And they understand that everybody has to have a price point they can come in on. So I want to give them some credit for that, but it is a dichotomy that I don't think you and I or Victor or anybody even in our chat can really fix, because this has been going on forever. But now it's just hyper escalated, and I don't, and that's something where, and we talked about the other things with the lawsuits. If the dam ever breaks, well, then things will calm down. The question is, does the dam ever break?
And this comment from Bo is that, he went to Dick's and they had tons of product. Now, why is Dick's getting mountains of boxes and Burbank is getting 3? How does that serve the hobby? I don't understand that. Victor, thoughts? I've been hearing a lot of videos on the topic, and there's a lot of complaints, and I don't blame people for complaining. It's definitely ridiculous, and there's a lot of, we're like nitpick every single thing that Fanatics is doing, again, with cause. I just think that what is not talked about and probably not looked at completely is the demand that is out there. And none of this would be happening if the demand was not so high. I think demand is so high that Fanatics themselves are having challenges and difficulties meeting that demand. And yes, there is imbalances with distribution, but I do think in time, because they're completely new to having all 3 licenses. This is fairly new for them, but I think in time they're going to make small adjustments and try to balance the scale on all sides, and they'll figure it out. That's
well,
I hope they do.
And there was a great quote saying they copied the Panini playbook. I mean, it's the Panini Prism football, because of downtowns and kabooms and all these hobby things. The boxes were $1,000 because they were all chasing that great insert, and people were paying it. I watch at the shows people paying money for these boxes that seem absolutely insane. As I said, I sit with one of my friends for an hour or two every Dallas card show. We chat about the hobby, but I also watch what goes on. And it's fascinating to sit and watch the new card world at one of the biggest and best card shows in the country.
Wait. So I did get a question here, and I think it's a fair question, and I am happy to answer it. Yes, I use the term inventory for vintage cards, and yes, I plead guilty. I said it because sometimes I have to go out and I have boxes and boxes filled with uncommons, because I go to card shows and I set up and I have huge boxes of 3,000 count boxes, 5,000 count boxes of commons, of extras, cards that I already own, already in my sets down under here. And I sell them at very reasonable rates, I might add. And then I use that money to buy fancy cards for me. So that's what I'm doing. And that way I don't have to go into my own personal funds that are, my wife and I have, so that we can live our lives and help our children and pay our rent and all that other stuff. I have hobby money that I make at shows to do hobby things. And to me, I think that's what I mean by inventory. It's cards
and collectors have been doing that for decades, Dan.
To defend Dan on that, we've talked a lot about this on Dr. Beckett's podcast. He was a collector. Most of the people in the 70s when he was doing shows before he became the price guide guru were collectors. They would go to the shows and they would buy these large collections, from people locally where they lived or whatever. And they would go to the shows. They would sell cards to people so they could buy cards for their own collection. And yes, they had an inventory. Dan is really a 1970s baseball card dealer. That's really what he is. He's pretty a 70s baseball card dealer. He could be back in the 70s and be happy.
And the prices keep going up the way they are. We're all going to become dealers.
This is inventory. This is collection. That's the difference.
And there's nothing wrong. And, I'm going to defend Dan. This is what we did 50 years ago.
Yeah.
The world has changed, but that's fairly common in the 70s and even into the 80s, where the people setting up at the shows had jobs. It was a weekend business for them. They were collectors, and they would use the money they made at the shows to buy items for their collection. It was a normal course of event. The hobby has evolved, and Dan, to his credit, because he's able to do that, is able to set up at shows and sell material that he purchases to fund items so he can finish. Notice how proud he is that he finished his 52 Bowman set. That's not an easy set to finish. Those last 36 cards, 217 to 252, are no joy. There is a Willie Mays in there. That's really not a joy to find.
I thought we were going to do a segment about rising vintage prices. Did we do that already?
No, by the way, but you notice he didn't know
that as soon as I say that I do have a job. It might not be the greatest job, and people might not be a big fan of it, but I do have a job. So that money is for my family and for my life and for my rent and to buy clothes and all different kinds of stuff. But the reality is that the hobby pays for the hobby is exactly what Uncle Rich was saying. It's been going on for years, and that's what it is. But I do have a real job. So, yes, vintage card prices. This is one of my bugaboos because, Victor, you just came from the show. You saw it. Was there some museum pricing? Sure there was. Was there decent pricing? Sure there was. It was a big show, so there was all different. It's a whole spectrum of prices. But generally speaking, vintage cards are very expensive these days. And you brought it up, and we brought it up in the pre-planning of the show. So why don't you take it away, Victor?
Yeah, I've been noticing. I noticed specifically at Strongsville. I've been noticing a lot of complaints on social media. Even looking at card ladder indexes, you can see the vintage market. And here's what I've been noticing is a trend, and that is some of these dealers, they do not care about comps, and they're blowing way past the comps. Why is that happening? Well, it's happening because they're going ways past comps and it's selling.
Yeah.
So there is a sect of people, whether they be novices, whether they be, I don't know what the deal is, whether they need repacked merchandise. I don't know why they're paying those higher prices, but it's happening. So it's making me kind of reconsider my strategy. And I'm really needing to kind of take a step back. I know you spoke about this in a recent video, but I'm not going to pay these inflated prices. I will wait for a market correction, and I think the wise collector should take the same approach, unless I'm missing something, guys.
One thing about vintage prices also, and I do want to ask, are we talking about graded card prices or raw prices?
Yeah, I do.
Mostly going to be graded.
Graded, yeah.
Okay, so I will point, you also talked about buying raw cards, and I don't think, from what I see, and granted it's the Dallas Card Show, which is a big show, but not really a super vintage-based show. I don't see vintage commons exploding in raw the way they are for higher condition graded. And the world there aren't that many high grade vintage cards available, and you are competing with other people who want to buy certain cards. It depends what you're looking for. I think there's always, as Victor's pointing out, there's always ways around everything. And you have to figure out what lane to be in and what you're comfortable with. I was looking up a guy named Mimo Luna the other day, who's a 54 Bowman. He never played a major league game. He's got a great name.
Memo Luna. I think
Memo
he did
Luna,
actually play one game. He played one game.
Played one
in
game.
53, and then they put him in the back of the 54 set. He's like one of the last cards in the set.
Yeah.
Bowman.
Yeah. The second series, thankfully, in 54 Bowman is not super tough. It's tougher, but not super tough. But it's a little tougher than the first series. And
fantastic question.
Mimo, I remember, and this is 1985 at one of my friends' stores, my friends Henry Davis and Hans Jubelt at H&H Hobby in Garfield. And Garfield is you're going to Garfield later, but Garfield is a lower middle class town for the most part. It is not a high priced area. And when this guy could not buy 54 Bowmans anymore at a quarter each, he stopped working on the set. That was the price, when he started, he could buy them at a quarter. And once it got past a quarter, he didn't want to buy anymore. And so everybody always has a price limit to what they want to do. And speaking of guests, my dog has decided she may want to go out. So if you forgive me for a minute or so, I'm going to let Miss Charlie out.
Miss Charlie.
All right.
All right.
So
you can let her out. Okay. My wife is letting her out.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, it's good to get help, but I'm always happy to let Miss Charlie go out.
It's a team. It's a team you got going on there.
And it's a team. We have teamwork. But the point is that everybody has a price point at some point where they just say no.
Right.
Yeah.
I paid $2 each for a bunch. I bought some vintage cards at a couple of my friends' stores, and they were $2 each. And I picked cards because I've had my collection. I don't collect anymore. Everything I buy is designed to be sold at some point. But right, I know what I can do. But I enjoy looking at the old cards more than I enjoy looking at. I'm going through some inventory right now. I was pricing. I enjoy that more than I enjoy this rookie year Josh Allen. Actually, I gotta get the right one. Rookie year Josh Allen, Panini Illusions, him and Jim Kelly card. I prefer vintage. But if I can make money on a modern card, guess what? It's good enough.
We got to show cards or we'll get criticized.
I showed cards.
Dan,
you did good, Dan.
But to finish your set or something similar.
My point is taking a pivot from the market. I've decided to revisit an old project that I have Sammy Sosa 90s inserts. And I'm having a blast at $5, $10, $20 range. And I'm picking
There
up
you
some
go.
fabulous cards from that era.
And
So-
eventually, Sammy will make the Hall of Fame, by the way. Those numbers will eventually put him into the Hall of Fame.
I hope I had an effect on you, Victor, when
You
I did that video.
You did.
All right. So I love this question. I love this question. And there is an answer to it, which is a smart answer. Do you think some of the bigger dealers put a premium on their cards due to the traffic they get at shows? And I think what Mike may be talking about are some of these dealers that Ruben later on pointed out that some of us on YouTube, and I'm responsible for this, I name the dealers that I get cards from, and I get a lot of cards from the same dealers. Did we make them celebrities, and therefore they think they can charge more and get away with it? I think that's a great point. Both Mike and Ruben, with some really good points on this, and I think the problem is that it might be the case that if you go to a certain guy, and I'm not going to name them because we're not talking about them in a positive way at this point, but if you go to a certain guy and you've got 10, 15 YouTubers telling you this guy's great, he's got great inventory, you should go to him, and then you'll be able to show and you can do a little thing on it, you can get content out of it. Is that going to increase the price you're willing to pay because this guy's great? We all know him, right? I mean, is that something is that a real issue? Victor, did you feel any of that at Strongsville? Like you knew who these guys were from YouTube?
I can't say I did. The only one, Texas Snowman, I had a sit down and conversation with him.
Right.
He's one that we've kind of made into a celebrity, right? He sponsors a lot of channels here on YouTube. Yeah. But I don't know. His prices are fair, in my opinion. So I can't really critique him in that way. I do think that some dealers, they're going to know the market probably a lot more than the common collector because they're in it. They're in the trenches like weekend after weekend. And I think they know what they've got. And they also know and see and sense the demand. And I think that's why they're, going higher than comps. To hell with comps. I'm sorry to cuss there. I know it's a family show, but trying to make my point here is what could possibly be why the prices are going up the way they are.
Well, I've actually sat with Jeremy at the Dallas Card Show just to watch how he does things. He's actually also set up at my synagogue, at my now smaller synagogue show. He did really well. He was there one day, did really well. Says, I don't need to come back tomorrow. Paid me for the tables. I said, wonderful. And then the other guy, and then his buddy, name of James, took all 3 tables in that area the next day and did $5,000 at my little 20 table show. So I mean, there's money that comes into my show, but that's a different subject for a different day. But Jeremy is a very fair person. He enjoys the interaction, and he wants to be fair on both ends. He wants to be fair as a buyer, and he wants to be fair as a seller. And, that's what we want. As I said, I watched him in the interaction with these people because we had a chat about something else. We never got to our chat, but I pay attention and watch the interactions. We talk a lot about, in Dr. Beckett's podcast, about the value boxes we go to at the Dallas Card Show. There are 4 or 5 vendors we both go to. And there's a coterie of people that go to those boxes just like we do. And some shows I do better than others. But the point is, we know who these people are. But most of these people at the value boxes are not the people you find on YouTube videos. Because they don't have flashy showcase stuff. They have stuff that is we'll call it nickel and dime, even though 60s commons, 70s commons, 50s commons aren't nickel and dime. But they're selling the nickel and dime stuff, not the 52 Mantle or the 52 Bowman Maze or a 53 Musial or something like that. Or some hot shot Aaron Judge rookie or Mike Trout rookie, who put on Homer shows at Yankee Stadium this week, or Paul Steens or Connor Griffin when he starts getting rookie cards.
That was good stuff.
Yeah, that was good stuff. But the point is, those aren't the people that are going to get on the YouTube videos. If you have a guy with a lot of common cards, you might get the the thing about people just digging through his table, but you're not going to get the individual showcase cards from his table.
So, Victor, you brought up a great point, and that's that some of these dealers know the cards so well that they can set the prices, and they can get the prices because people are willing to pay for them. The problem with comping a card like this, I got this card at like 4 times the comp number because the comp means nothing because it hasn't sold, in like 8 years, and this one, there are literally 5 of these in the world. So if you own 3 of them, it's a 1921 Oxford confectionery Grover Cleveland. There are 5 of these. And so if you own 3 of them, you can set the price. So that happens. And I don't think it's wrong. It's not great because I spent a lot of money on some of these cards, but I don't think it's necessarily wrong. And in that sense, when you have very, very low pop, rare stuff, pre-war stuff, and you know it, and you know what you have, and you know what is out there, you can set the price. And the price is really comps are a way to come to a price, but the price really is what you said before. It's what somebody is willing to pay. And if they're selling, they're going to keep putting those numbers on them.
Yep.
Well, if you have a really scarce card,
yeah,
you can set your price. I once wrote a long time ago when I was writing for Sports Collectors Daily. There's a 1920 set called The Fan. I think there may be 4 total cards known from that set. If I found a Babe Ruth from that set and it was deemed legitimate, and that one I would obviously grade it, I could put whatever price I wanted on that card, and guess what? Who's going to argue? You can argue, and I'll say, find me another one.
Yeah. Yeah, but even the common stuff, more iconic cards, the 8s, 9s, and 10s are just, it's like the last comp means nothing when you talk about Hank Aaron PSA 9. It's going up and up and up.
And I think that's really my point, circling back to what we talked about earlier today. There are still set collectors, and it's wonderful there are set collectors. But a younger coterie of collectors, or certain collectors, and I don't even know if collector is the right word, they're not going to try to finish. If it's a 60 tops Hank Aaron and PSA 9, they may not care about whether they get their Frank Bowling card or their even a Jim Cott rookie or Julio Navarro or whomever, George Miranda, whoever common you want. They're just going to want the Aaron card in that really nice shape and say, thank you. That's what I really want. That's what I'm collecting. And that's okay. But that's part of what I've been talking. That's part of what we talk about is not everybody collects sets. The great thing with Strongsville, and Dan, you're in New York, so you see this more. I grew up in the New York area. There's a lot of raw vintage up and down the megalopolis. Strongsville is near enough the megalopolis. You see a lot of vintage.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot harder to do a vintage show here in Dallas. I might be able to do a 50 table vintage show. I might not be, maybe even 100, but I couldn't fill up a gymnasium like that.
Yeah. Victor's loving the chat. I can tell you that much. So
Going to collect screenshots.
Boozle has had a good day. I can tell you that.
Oh my goodness.
Bob has had one of his best contributing to the chat days, and he is an absolute treasure.
You can afford Mick. If you can afford Mickey Tettleton, I can afford Mickey Mailer.
Well, gentlemen, we have gone over. We're over an hour. 104. Some of us have to go to Dallas. I'm sorry, New Jersey. Dallas show in New Jersey. Some of us have to go there. So I'm going to log off. It has been a fantastic show. Uncle Rich, as always, it is wonderful to hear you, your wisdom, your knowledge, all that stuff. Victor, I wish you would have talked more. Next time I'm going to make you talk more. You, sir, are a absolute treasure in the hobby. And it was wonderful to shake your hand and meet your wife and hang out with you a little bit at Strongsville. I hope to
Victor,
do that again
you
next
did not
year.
stay in a hotel anywhere as bad as the George Washington Motor Lodge Willow Grove. I can assure you of that.
The chat was awesome. So good show, gentlemen. We're gonna log off, and I'm gonna go get in my car and drive to Edison and look at more cards. Because what do we do on weekends? That's all we do. We look at cards. So anyway, take care, folks.
All righty.
Bye.
Oops, got to run the stream.